From the Corner Office is brought to you by Synovus Bank, championing business growth through trusted, relationship-driven banking throughout the Gulf Coast region. Debbie LaPinska spent some of her career behind the scenes, first working her way up to a C-suite level position at one of Sarasota County's largest employers, PGT Innovations. Now Debbie is the Chief People Officer for a global cabinet company. Along the way, Debbie has learned some important lessons in leadership from her mentors and others in her career by being humble and open to feedback. The Business Observer writes about leaders like Debbie every day online and every week in print. Go to businessobserverfl.com to subscribe. Hello and welcome to the Business Observer's From the Corner Office podcast. I'm Mark Gordon, managing editor of the Business Observer. Today's guest is Debbie LaPinska, Chief People Officer of CabinetWorks Group. Debbie, welcome and thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So Debbie, we're going to get into your career with CabinetWorks, what you're doing there. We're going to talk about PGT, where you spent the bulk of your leadership and human resources and growth career. Let's get our audience to know you a little bit better before we talk about leadership and PGT. And I didn't check with you first. I hope this is okay, but we're switching up our rapid fire questions. You're the
Okay.
debut of this. So we are going to go with first. That's the theme, is firsts. So for example, Debbie, what was your first car?
My first car was a 1970 Monte Carlo. My dad was in the car business. He was the new car manager for a Pontiac dealership. So he had access to a lot of different vehicles through going to auctions. And so I was fortunate to get a new car every 6 months because he wanted to
Really?
go and buy them. I think he enjoyed them more than I did. But anyways,
Yeah.
that was my first car, 1970 Monte Carlo.
All right, excellent. What about your first concert? What was your first concert?
First concert, ironically, I grew up in south side of Chicago. I made a trip down here to Florida with a family friend, and their son took me to see Bruce Springsteen in St. Petersburg.
Oh, I'm very jealous. Bruce Springsteen in St. Petersburg. So that was, what time period do you think that was?
Oh, all right. Well, now I'm going to give out my age, but that would have been in the 70s.
I was trying to delicately ask that just in case people are listening, not watching, in the 70s. All right, but that was, so we're talking Born to Run time. Fantastic. I love that.
Yes. Yes.
All right. And what was your first job, Debbie?
My first job was working in a family fast food restaurant, behind the counter, making milkshakes and root beer floats and things like that. So, kind of your typical first job, hourly
Yeah.
position.
Yeah, but you learn a lot in those jobs too, right? We're going to talk about management in a second and leadership. I bet you learned a lot about what you liked and what you didn't like in that work.
Oh, yes. I learned a lot about what it's like to work with customers, nice and maybe not so nice customers.
Yeah. Yeah. You see all sides. So Debbie, thanks for indulging in on our first there. I like those are good answers. Tell us about CabinetWorks. You're here in Florida in the Sarasota area. CabinetWorks is all over, but tell us about what CabinetWorks is and how you got involved with this company.
Sure. So CabinetWorks is a cabinet manufacturer, one of the top three cabinet manufacturers in the U.S. It's a privately held company. The two major competitors are public companies. And the headquarters is located in Livonia, Michigan, so just outside of Detroit. And there's 15 manufacturing facilities across the U.S. And then we have the back office support in Pune, India.
And how did you get on with this company?
Well, this is going to be the funny story. So, um, yeah, I worked with Jeff Jackson at PGT Innovations. So I retired when PGT sold because at that time we all left the senior executive team, and I knew Jeff was not finished with his uh with his career, and so shortly thereafter he decides to take on the CEO position of CabinetWorks Group and started calling me pretty regularly asking me to join the organization. And I think I held out for about 6 months. And he convinced me to come on as a contractor and lead them through their strategic planning process. And so what actually happened is Jeff is a very smart man, very strategic. Knew once I decided to do that that I'd be kind of reeled in and sucked in. And then while we were meeting in the lobby talking about the success of the event, he convinced me to come on full time. And so that's how I joined the company.
That sounds very Jeff, and Jeff Jackson, as you said, CEO of PGT, who was a guest in the early days of From the Corner Office. That's so Jeff because what he probably did too in his sort of Georgia Southern drawl, he was really nice about it, but persistent, and then made you think it was your idea to come back on, right? That sounds like Jeff.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, Jeff, who Jeff is, he kept telling me that I missed him and that I needed to come back to
Yes.
work because I missed him so much, right?
Yes.
But he knew I wasn't really quite ready to kind of hang up the hat, and I'm enjoying it. And I've finished my first year with them and having a lot of fun, kind of rebuilding what we built at PGT at CabinetWorks.
Yeah, and that's I've talked to Jeff about that. So, sticking on that theme, because I was gonna ask you later about your mentors, and certainly could be other people, but specific to Jeff, because, he took over or not took over, but he was he's CFO at PGT during a big growth period when you were there, and then became
Yeah.
CEO, obviously. So you've worked very closely with him. What have you learned about, leadership and just, building companies, working side by side with Jeff Jackson for all these years?
Yeah, we've had an interesting relationship. So, I mean, we obviously have worked together for over 20 years. I had been with PGT before I retired for close to 33 years. So, I was part of the company with a lot of growth. So, I had experience with a lot of different leaders. Jeff came in at a very interesting time. That was right when we took the company, or he was hired prior to us taking the company public. That was the reason why we hired him, was we needed an experienced CFO that had been in the public company environment. And so um we go out, we do the, IPO, everything's great, and then the major downturn hits. And you're going 100 miles an hour, and now you're slowed down to 5 miles an hour. And so one of the things that I learned that we had never experienced in the history of PGT was how we have to make some cuts. We're not going to survive this thing with the current structure. So being, the numbers and the financial expert that he is, he taught me a lot about the business and the reasons why we have to do some of the things. And while a lot of times you think short term, what about the people and what about this? Our job was, we needed to keep the company strong and healthy and alive, and that means making tough decisions. So I guess that's probably what I learned the most from him, is sometimes these decisions aren't popular, but as a leader, you have to make the decisions for the greater good of the company and the rest of the population, even though that means you may have to make those tough decisions regarding other people.
Yeah, I mean, you went through that, as you said, during that, downturn time where, well, I guess that would have been
Yeah.
2012, 13-ish. So, what was that like for you kind of on and off the job? How did you as a leader who had been there for so long and knew these people, how did you process that part of it where you guys had to let people go?
Yeah, well, initially it starts off being somewhat emotional because it had been a family-run business for so long under Rod
Yeah.
Hirschberger's leadership. And now, we're a public company, and you've got the scrutiny of, being a public company, and you've got to, kind of separate your emotions. And it's hard to say, it's easy to say, it's hard to do. You have to be compassionate. You have to understand that when you're having those tough conversations with people, making sure that they understand, listen, this is not a reflection of them. This is business. This is the environment. And unfortunately, we have to make this tough decision and be as empathetic and caring and compassionate as you possibly can without, being vulnerable and too emotional in that
Yeah.
conversation. So it's a balance that you have to actually have.
Yeah. And you're talking a little bit as you're saying, one of the things you're talking about is building trust, right? That's so important in any
Yeah.
organization. Debbie, as a leader, how have you, and what are some sort of examples or I don't know, advice you would give to others, but how have you built trust with teams over the years in your career?
I think that, when you're given a responsibility to go make a change or do something, your first instinct is you're going to just go in there and do it. And I think we've all learned the hard way. You can't just go in there and make change and do things. You really got to get to know the environment, the people, the situation, really do your assessment to know that whatever change you're going to make is going to be the right change. And it's going to be a change that is gonna last or move forward. Oftentimes you may make a decision and then you realize you made the wrong decision. Now you gotta make another one and make another change, and that just puts more pain and stress on the folks that you're affecting. So I'd say, kind of like a 30, 60, 90-day plan. Go in, assess what the current environment situation is like, start forming your plan. And then really I think the important thing is being transparent and honest with the people that you're leading as to the reason why a change has to happen. How does this change impact you, and what are we going to do to best support you? So it's really, getting to know people, building that relationship, and then being honest and transparent, even if that means you have to deliver a tough message. You just have to be transparent. You can't make excuses. You can't blame anything. Just be factual, and again, still bringing that compassion
Yeah.
and that empathetic side along with it.
How'd you do that personally? I'm curious, like, did you have notes that you were gonna say? Did you have cards in front of you? You know, these could be, as you said, emotional conversations, at least for me. Sometimes can get thrown off my game when I have a game plan going in. What is your sort of
Yeah.
process to communicate these challenging messages?
Yeah, I would write, not a whole speech or a whole set of words, if you will. I would do, bullet points. What's the key objective? What's the message that I need to get across? How am I going to do that? And then what am I going to do if it goes sideways, or if, there's difficulty in accepting that. So, it's really just prepping, and sometimes it's you got to be able to react on the fly because you can't always anticipate every situation that's going to come up. And so sometimes it's watching body language, or it's hearing something being stated over and over again and saying, "Okay, this is a hot topic. Didn't think about that. Now, how am I going to respond to it?" And sometimes your response is, "Hey, listen, you know what? I'm really sorry. I didn't take that into consideration, but let me give that some thought, and let me get back with you on what we can do. I appreciate, you being or being candid with me. Now let me see if there's anything we can do to adjust." So, your best laid plans don't always go the way they're supposed to. It's how you can recover and respond when they don't go your way.
Recover and respond, so important. Sure. Big picture question, Debbie. How do you define leadership?
I think leadership is really having a relationship with your team in a way that you know each individual as an individual. So, kind of seeing them as a person, not as an object, and then understanding what their strengths and their opportunities are and how to best position them for success. A lot of times people think they have to go down one path because that's the only path they see for their career. And you can see potential in them that they don't necessarily see in themselves. And you can guide them down another path where um, they could be more successful because you're leveraging those skills that they're not maybe recognizing. And so leadership is really taking people, I think, to a place that they wouldn't necessarily go all on their own, and helping them to see their true value and the opportunities that that brings forward for them.
Yeah, I feel like, and from our previous conversations, I feel like you had a little of that in your career. Tell us about how you grew, PGT 33 years, your sort of career trajectory, and who sort of guided you along that way.
Yeah, like I said, I've had a couple of different leaders, Rod Hirschberger obviously being the first one, and he was very much a servant leadership, cared deeply about people in the organization. And so my career started on the on the customer side of things. Walked in, started taking orders for them back, in 1991. Wasn't really going to be a career. It was just going to be a temporary job until I found something different. And I saw the capabilities that the organization had very early on and was really excited by that. And then I think because of leaders like Rod and the original founder, Paul Hostetler, saw things in me and started presenting me with different opportunities where I decided that, okay, this is going to be a career. Now, what do I need to do? How do I improve myself? I went back and got my education. And my degree. And then as opportunities came up, as the company started growing, I started, um, you know, being a little bit more assertive and asking for opportunities. And then there was another leader that told me, you don't have to be the expert in everything. You just need to know enough to be dangerous. If you're really good with people, you can lead any function within the organization. And then, you surround yourself with really talented people, especially people that kinda complement you. You have a certain set of skills and strengths, but I don't have everything, so I make sure that, making sure that you have people on your team that really, um, can do the things that you can't do.
Yeah, I wanna go back and I like that. So, you had this advice that was, you don't have to be the expert at everything, but you can be dangerous at some things and really good at people. What was that stage in your career, and how did that sort of elevate you to new heights?
Yeah. So, I was at the time, I was, leading the sales organization, and then, eventually marketing came alongside that, which that wasn't odd. But when I was asked to take on our transportation and logistics group, that one was a little scary because now I'm talking about, 50 truck drivers that I'm now going to try and connect with that are on the road and find everything wrong with what we do. But the reason for that connection was that there needed to be one voice and one vision of how we were going to interact with our customers and how we were going to be an organization that really provided customer intimacy or customer delight. And so I had to communicate with these truck drivers on a regular basis why their jobs were so critically important to this initiative and listen to what they experienced and what their challenges were. So I mean, I would come in at 3:30 in the morning with them when they were getting ready to go out on their trucks, have meetings with them, tell them what I kind of expected them to do when they're interacting with the customers. And then the next meeting, they'd come back and tell me my idea was crazy and why, and challenge some of those things. But at 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 the end of it all, when I wasn't leading them, those drivers that had been with me, still contacted me on a regular basis, asking me for advice or telling me about their issues because I earned their trust and respect. And so that was where I really tested okay, you don't need to be the expert. I didn't know anything about trucking and logistics, but I knew a lot about people and how
Yeah.
to win them over and had some success with that.
Yeah, I mean, that goes back to what you said before about building that trust and that sort of 30, 60, 90, or over communicating or just letting them know I'm this person for you here and you can trust me to talk. It sounds like that's what you were able to accomplish with them.
Yeah, really, it's because you become their advocate while
Yeah.
you're still responsible for leading and obviously leading is having a vision and a plan and communicating that vision and plan and helping your team execute on that and then letting them go. Sometimes it's just get out of their way and let them go and then you just have to block and tackle for them. You don't have to do
Yeah.
it. You
Yeah.
need them to do it.
Yeah. So true. On going back to leadership, uh what as in your career, what feedback did you hear that was really hard at the time, but you learned the most from as a leader that helped you grow the most?
Yeah, so this was at PGT. So as I mentioned, I was leading the sales and marketing initiative, and I was part of the team that was doing the initial IPO. So Jeff and Rod and I were doing the roadshow, presenting to investors, and then, as I mentioned, the downturn hit, and so we were owned still partially by the private equity firm, and we knew that there was their exit strategy was, take the company public, and in order to get enough interest, the top line growth needed to be there, right? Revenue is a big deal, and then bottom line EBITDA is the next big um, measuring metric, if you will. So I remember the conversation very clearly. I remember Rod and Jeff telling me that um, they needed to make a change, and they needed to go out and hire an experienced sales executive to take on the sales initiative. And so that message to me was, you're not doing a good enough job, so we got to go hire someone else to do it. And initially, it was shock, it was hurt, it was all those things. Like, I've been doing this for X number of years, and now all of a sudden I'm not good enough, right? So that was hard to hear. And I think that the bigger part of it is, it's hard to hear. Now, what are you going to do about it, right? Well, they valued me enough that they wanted me to stay on in the organization. So they basically said, what do you want to do? What department, what group do you want to lead? And initially I took a couple days to think about it because you're still going through the shock. But I came back and I said, you know what? I want to take on human resources. And I thought, well, I can leverage what I've done on the sales organization side with our sales team and with our customers. It was all about relationships. That's what our strength was. Now, how do I take that same philosophy and build relationships with the internal customer, our team members? And it was really important at that time because we had gone through so many reductions in force. We were at one point, I think, close to 2,500 team members, and we were down to 800, through that downturn. And so there was a lot of morale issues because of all the cuts. So now I needed to rebuild the culture and get people to feel confident and believe that the company cared. And so, yeah, the message was hard. I had to turn it around and say, okay, how can I take all this energy and repurpose it in a positive manner that would benefit the company, and in the long run, help me overcome that disappointment.
Yeah, and people, we talk about resilience a lot. That's pretty resilient of you. Love that story. Debbie, as we wind down here, but we're just starting 2026. Last question, what's new and on the horizon and exciting for you at CabinetWorks the rest of the year going into this year?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, this organization has really good people and had a good foundational culture, but had been um, kind of what's the word I want to use? Just there was no focus on the people. Everything about the previous leadership was, oh, cut costs, hit the numbers, and not really any investments in our people. So obviously that's really big for Jeff. And so what we did this past year was build the foundation. So it's kind of like building a house. Your house isn't strong if you don't have a foundation that's strong, right? So we put a lot of simple things back in place that showed this team that we were invested in them. If we were going to be successful in the market and grow, it was going to be because of them. So now going into 2026, that foundation is set, and now we're really putting in more robust programs. So we're investing in, how do we train our frontline leaders on the production line to be leaders? They're oftentimes really good workers on a production line, and then we say, oh, you've been blessed to be now a production supervisor, and you have to lead people with no training. So we're implementing a whole new training program for them. We are we have been growing mid-level leaders through the John Maxwell 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. So we're teaching that to our leaders. And then we are also using the Arbinger Institute's outward mindset, outward performance for that director level and above. And that's really all of the programs are centered around servant leadership. And so I'm really excited that we're making investments in our people, and beyond that, just other ways to give back to them. There were no bonus programs. We have bonus programs established. We have support programs. And so we're now starting to see where this team is there. They believe in us. They're trusting us. And now we're able to do a lot more and be more successful in, growing this business.
Excellent. A lot of progress. I love it. Debbie LaPinska, Chief People Officer of CabinetWorks Group. Thank you so much for joining us on the From the Corner Office podcast.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you for listening to the Business Observer From the Corner Office podcast. I'm your host, Mark Gordon. This podcast was produced by Reed Corley of the Corley Company in Sarasota. To hear more episodes of From the Corner Office podcast, go to businessobserverfl.com.